Are we ready? Hi, Renee. How are you? Thank you. Thanks, Chris. You promised you'd be helpful. So before I introduce our keynote speaker, I just wanted to really point out the obvious that we're having a bit of a British invasion here today. Sir Richard Branson, Graham Boynton, and now the Right Honorable Tony Blair. But maybe that's as it should be. The Brits, after all, invented the modern age of travel and exploration. And I think it's also no coincidence that Tony Blair's book is called A Journey, which is a title we love at this magazine. A brief commercial message. The book debuted on the New York Times bestseller list yesterday at number 3, and it's been selling on Amazon in the very top for the last 10 days already. So we talk a lot about travel, or about the idea of global citizenship, the way travel sort of opens our eyes to what's happening in the world and encourages a sense of responsibility. The Right Honorable Tony Blair is nothing if not a global citizen. In his role as founder of the Tony Blair Faith Foundation, of the Africa Governance Institute, and as the Quartet representative for the Middle East, he travels 3 weeks out of 4, our dream reader. In just the past 4 days, Mr. Blair has been in the Middle East, New York, back to London, and now again here with us today. And he shares our view that tourism can help improve people's lives. One example, his Africa Governance Initiative works with leaders of Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and Liberia to attract sustainable investment. And the initiative he's spearheading in Sierra Leone, especially focused on encouraging tourism as an engine of economic growth. Tourism is equally central in what these days is perhaps Mr. Blair's most consuming work as the Quartet representative to the Middle East, a position he accepted on the very same day that he resigned as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. His goal is to enable the peace process by preparing Palestinians for statehood, which, speaking broadly, involves bolstering the Palestinian economy and thus giving the people there a stake in the process. As Mr. Blair said in the interview we published in our September issue, he believes that peace is attainable. It won't happen in the negotiating room, however. It must happen on the ground. And I quote, "If we could develop tourism the way it should be developed in the Holy Land, where Israelis and Palestinians were working together to exploit the common potential, that would be a major bonus for peace." And another instance of the power of travel. Please welcome the Right Honorable Tony Blair.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you here today at the Council on Foreign Relations, and thank them very much for hosting it, and thank Clara very much for that immensely kind and generous introduction. And actually, she was going to plug the book as well, which is very good of you. And I actually appeared in the September edition, didn't I? The Traveller. I know. That was, I guess, one of my great moments, actually, really. Because, appeared in many magazines in my time, but never before in the Traveller magazine. I kind of feel I've finally arrived, really, with that one. For one thing, what I said appeared reasonably accurately represented, so that was good too. Now, what I'm going to do is to talk to you about tourism in the Holy Land, but in the context, obviously, of what's happening in the Middle East. Just to say one general point about the Middle East and the Middle East peace process. Obviously, this week in New York, there are going to be some critical meetings about it, about both support for the Palestinian Authority, but also for the process of peace. And just to state what may appear to those of us on the inside of this process to be obvious, but is not necessarily obvious to the outside world. We are at an absolutely critical juncture of this process. But we have a generational opportunity to create peace here. We have an American president who has made this issue a priority from the very beginning of his time. We have got two leaders, I know them both well on either side, who genuinely want peace. We have a region that, whatever the past, wants the future to be different and wants that to be a future of peace. And since I spend probably as much time, if not more than most, both on the Palestinian side and on the Israeli side, within their politics, within their media, within their societies, I can tell you both peoples want peace. So our challenge is very, very obvious, but so is our opportunity. And my whole pitch on this really is that we won't create peace in the Middle East unless we combine a political negotiation, which is what we've been trying to do for years and years and years, with what I call a bottom-up state-building approach, which means building the Palestinian economy, its institutions of governance, its capacity to run a state. Because the whole point about the two-state solution, we wish to reach a state of Israel that is secure, a state of Palestine that is viable. The whole point about that is that we will only reach that two-state solution if we have a Palestinian state that is not just about borders, but is also about security, how it's governed, how it functions, and the strength of its economy. Which brings me to the issue of tourism. And tourism in the Holy Land, which I will use as a shorthand for Israel and Palestine and indeed beyond. This comes at a moment when actually we have some momentum with us. In Palestine itself, numbers of tourists have risen sixfold in the past few years. In Israel, numbers of tourists have gone up 40% in just the last year. In the West Bank, in Palestine, hotel occupancy has almost doubled. The number of guests in Palestinian hotels is up by something like 40%. That's just in the last year. So this is quite an impressive record, and it's part of a broader economic picture where Palestinian growth, altogether West Bank and Gaza, is probably about, well, last year they're predicting now it would come out at about 9%, but in the second quarter of 2010, on the West Bank was about 12.5%, which is not bad. We had an investors conference in Bethlehem, and this took place incidentally right at one of the most difficult moments after the flotilla incident and so on. We got roughly 1,500 to 2,000 people there, including many people from the tourism trade. We got hundreds of millions of dollars of investment out of it. And the reason why the tourist numbers are coming and growth is high is because amidst all the bad news you will read, one very, very benign thing is happening. The Palestinian Authority has, over the past 2 or 3 years, with international support, but really from their own endeavor, under the leadership of Prime Minister Fayyad and the President, Mahmoud Abbas, they have been doing their own security. They have been developing a proper rule of law, court system. The result of that is they've taken militia off the streets. When you go, as I do just the other week and was in Nablus, whereas 3 years ago I probably couldn't have gone there, today I can go there and go there perfectly peacefully. Indeed, as someone said, I probably have, in some respects, more security with me when I'm in parts of Western Europe than I do when I'm out in Palestine, but that may be a reflection on me. But it's just a fascinating thing to see that this, even amidst all the difficulties, and the news is inevitably dominated by some of the worst things that happen, but actually, when you're going around the West Bank now, you're going around, and the tourists go around with absolutely no problem at all, made extremely welcome. The cooperation between the Israeli Defense Force and the Palestinian security in order to protect ordinary Palestinians is probably better than it's been. It could be better still as the Palestinian security presence extends into all parts of the West Bank, but nonetheless, it is there and it is important to underline. The UK and Germany, just to mention two countries, have recently changed their travel advice. Gaza is a different story altogether, and that is just true. But the West Bank is in a very, very strong position indeed. Now, the potential, however, is still absolutely enormous. because fewer people go to the Holy Land than visit the Vatican. About half as many go to the Holy Land as go to Jordan. Right? The potential of this place, now here's where I'm going to give you the sales pitch, right? And I do it with total sincerity and as somebody who actually loves being a tourist as well as a politician in the small amounts of time that I can do that. Here is the thing about this part of the world. We don't actually, I don't think, have a map to show you, but it's a very small bit of land, bit of territory. When you stand on Mount Nebo on the Jordan side, and where there is a wonderful 4th century church, where you can have a service there. But you stand on Mount Nebo, this is where Moses is supposed to have looked out over the Promised Land. And you literally can see right across the Jordan Valley. When dusk falls, you can actually see the lights of Jerusalem in the distance. And you are there in this most extraordinary historic site. You understand why, back in the 1860s, I think, that Mark Twain said that the only problem with visiting the Holy Land is that every few miles you had to read up on 100 years of history. You know, when you're in Jerusalem, the Wailing Wall, the Dome of the Rock, the Nativity Church, they're within about half an hour of each other. People know about Jerusalem. They know about Bethlehem, of course. They know about Nazareth. But let me tell you about some of the other places that I've visited just in the past few months. A place like Sebastia, where back in the 1960s, you used to have tens of thousands of tourists a year, where you barely have anyone now. This place in Sebastia is an absolutely fascinating, beautiful Palestinian village. In the village is the tomb of John the Baptist, minus the head. That church that is there was left when Saladin came and conquered the territory and built a mosque next door. But because Saladin actually was himself somebody who paid respect to other religions, he left the tomb and the church there. You go about a few hundred yards from where these two extraordinary things are, the tomb and the church, and there are just acres of ruins from the Byzantine, the Greek, the Roman era. I mean, there's one little kiosk there. But it could be developed into something absolutely extraordinary. The other day I was in Nablus, and I was taken to Jacob's Well, right, which is, and it's looked after now by a Greek Orthodox priest in his church, a very extraordinary gentleman. So I go in there, we actually see the well, Jacob's Well, and he says to me, you know, as a good Christian, I think you should drink from this well, and I'm going to put the bucket down and lift you up some water or something. Oh my God. Actually, drew up from the bottom of the well. Look, it's absolutely clear water. I drank it and no ill effect. I'm still with you here today. But, you know, you go a few miles out of Nablus, and there is the community of the original Samaritans, right, are still living there, by the way. And you can talk to them. They're Jews, or part of Judaism, obviously, but living there in Nablus as they have been for centuries. You pass then by on the way from Nablus to Jenin, St. George's Church, built in the 4th century or 3rd century, in the 4th century, one of the oldest churches in the world. There's literally nobody really there. You go down into Jericho, and all of these places can be got to within an hour of each other, maximum. You see Herod's palace, his winter palace, which is just a site that is still now being developed. You go a short distance from there, you go up to the Mount of Temptation, where they take all the politicians, I think. And you go up there, and you have this incredible view, and there you are, right in the middle of an extraordinary piece of history. You can go to Jericho. You see the oldest city in the world, and just by Jericho is the Dead Sea. So, you know, I know I sound slightly evangelical about this, probably the wrong thing to say in these circumstances, but the potential of this place is absolutely extraordinary. And anybody from any of the Abrahamic religions, or anybody indeed with an interest in antiquity, is going to be fascinated to go there. So I don't minimize the political challenges because they're there. I think the progress is a matter and a statement of fact, and you can talk to people who have been there, but the potential is also absolutely beyond doubt and is phenomenal. And the only constraint that there should be is the constraint of the numbers of people that can comfortably be accommodated. Now, what is actually happening is they are building new hotels there. There is investment coming in. And part of the work that I'm doing is to put together what I want to be a major tourism plan that is owned by both Israelis and Palestinians. Because I want, whatever the political difficulties and differences, the fact is the Holy Land is the Holy Land as a whole, and people want to go to the Holy Land. Right? And then they can go just a short way across, of course. You go across the Allenby Bridge, you travel into Jordan, or you can come back in from the Jordan side. And then, of course, in Jordan, there is also the most marvelous things to see. This is what we're trying to do now. First of all, we've got the Israeli and the Palestinian private sector in tourism in agreement. They've had some 4 meetings with our help over the past few months. They are now agreed on what they want to do. So you've got the 2 private sectors working together. The next stage is to get the governments to also come together on a common and agreed plan. That's what we're working for at the moment, but I think we will be successful in that in the next few months. The idea then is to have a major joint marketing campaign for the Holy Land, and actually be completely specific about it, that this is about an opportunity to visit Israel and Palestine, but all under the rubric of the Holy Land. The third thing is that we are agreeing the removal of certain restrictions so that we can make life easier to move about on the West Bank. Many of the restrictions have been lifted in the past few months, and that's greatly eased people's ability to travel, but we need to do more. So, for example, there is a wonderful trail, the Footsteps of Jesus, which goes from Nazareth down to Bethlehem, and you go through various different places there. I mean, we're in negotiation now to make sure that that is a good experience with the minimum of difficulty. And, each step along that way, incidentally, is just replete with historical significance. We've just got agreed and now implemented the first Israeli guides who are going to be going into the West Bank, which is important as well. And in time, we want to make sure that expands. And there are plans for joint investment as well. So the idea is not separated from all the political issues to do with peace, but in support of them, to create a platform for the development of this potential of tourism in the economy, both of Israel and of Palestine. And by doing that, obviously, it's of huge support to the peace process. Now, I think it's a tremendous opportunity in itself. So I know this is the World Savers Congress, and everyone's here to save the world, which is a very good thing, incidentally. And I want you to know that. But actually, even if you were just somebody interested in a decent business opportunity, this is a fantastic place to go and to see. And my plea to you would be to come and see it and make up your own mind. So I've given you the sort of sales pitch and told you why I think it's wonderful, and why I can see many, many more people taking the opportunity to come. But come, and my office will be happy, along with the Israelis and the Palestinians, to facilitate anybody who wants to come and wants to see and see what you can do. Let me just explain finally why it's so important that this happens. You see, the political negotiation will deal with issues that are very familiar to everybody who's handled these negotiations over the past 30 years or so. And believe me, there are people who've been handling them for as long as that. And those issues are to do with the borders, Jerusalem, refugees, water, security, all the issues that are very, very familiar. And frankly, the solutions are pretty familiar too. They may divide out this way or divide out that way, but they're within a parameter that's pretty well understood. And people often say to me, well, if the issues are all understood and are clear, then how come it's so difficult to solve them? And my answer to that, in part borrowed from the experience of the Northern Ireland peace process, is this, that if you want a peace process to succeed, the political negotiation has to be capably and competently managed, but you need the surrounding reality to support that political negotiation. And what do I mean by that in the Israel-Palestine context? For the Israelis, their issue is security. And as I say, when you look at how small this territory is, you realize that the people either live together peacefully or they're in conflict. There's no let's just get away from each other type of thing. Right? And for the Israelis, unless they can be sure of their security, whatever the political negotiation might yield, it's hard for them, right, to be clear that a two-state solution will work. Likewise with the Palestinians, their reality is the problem of occupation. And they need to be sure that if they take the steps necessary for Palestinian governance and capacity, that the Israelis will get out and let them run their state. So in the end, the issue is not just about a big political negotiation with leaders sitting in a room looking at maps and thinking about what solution they could come up with for Jerusalem. It's also about the reality on the ground. And that reality matters particularly because the people on either side want peace. Right? You ask them whether they want peace, they'll say yes. You ask them whether they're going to get peace, and they'll say, I don't think so. And that's because they don't see a reality that corresponds to that political objective. And the whole purpose of what we're trying to do with the economy and with the institutions of the Palestinians, so that the Palestinians show that they can, for their own good, do their security and run it properly. For Palestinian people, we show there is a huge economic opportunity here, so let's take advantage of it. That's why these things, that we're talking about, in this case very specifically tourism, are not things that are just separated out in a compartment called tourism or business opportunities. They are actually integral to the politics of this situation working. So when I got the chance for the Conde Nast travel to come along and address you here today, I wanted to do it not just to stress that it is, I think, a fantastic business opportunity and tourism has this enormous potential, but in doing it, if you are interested in playing a part in creating peace between Israelis and Palestinians, and therefore peace in that region, and therefore greater security and peace in the world, this is one very important way that it can happen. So I hope you will reflect on all that if you can. And as I say, the best thing to do is to come and see it. And the spirit of the people there is fantastic. I mean, I said to you that Gaza was very difficult, but at the Bethlehem Investment Conference, we did a presentation on tourism. And the guys from Gaza said, we're going to give you our pitch as well. Look, guys, this is a bit difficult, And there's this lovely guy from Gaza who came along to give the pitch for tourism for Gaza. And it was just, he said, but I can show you where Samson pulled the walls down. And I said, it's great, but, we're going to, I think it'll take a little bit of time before people get the confidence to come there. But the West Bank, obviously completely different. But the point about it is this. You will find, and people who are tourists will find when they come, they get the warmest possible welcome, both on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. And they will have an experience that is profound and moving. And they will enjoy it immensely, as I do, because I love it whilst I'm there. People often say to me, why on earth do you want to spend so much time there? And I say, I love every moment I'm there, and I do. And as well as enjoying it, if they can feel that they're also playing a small but important part in creating peace, a better region, and a better world, then I think that's what world saving is all about. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.